Good morning, guys. Good afternoon or good evening. This is Good Music Fan, the Rabid Cyclist, coming at you. I thought I'd start off with this web series by, defining, what is a bike and all that. And I know on YouTube, you want to know what a bike is, there's infinite numbers of videos relating to this. You want to know what a particular part is, that's what this is. You can find it online. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen, just last night recently. Okay, that's on YouTube now, huh? Okay, good for you. Well, anyway, we're going to start off this episode with what is a bike? A bike, by definition, is and I'll have a link to Wikipedia's definition of a bike, even though it's not the most accurate. It is the one that will suffice for the argument. But basically, a bicycle is a human-powered vehicle with either one wheel, as in the case of a unicycle, or up to as many as four in the case of a quadricycle. Now, your standard bike is what is called a diamond frame, or an upright. These are bikes you rode as a kid. You learned how to ride on one after you graduated from your tricycle, and they were usually the kind that if they had a brake on it, you had to crank backwards on your pedals to slow the bike and stop it. And as you graduated to something that had gears and a selector and all that stuff, cranking backward just made a really cool noise. Okay. Those particular type of bikes will run you anywhere. I've seen them for as little as, $100 at a big box store, Poly World, or, up to probably around 3,300 for what you could find in a high-end bike shop. They come in different varieties. You've got some diamond frames that are specifically meant for track cycling. And you've probably seen videos on this on YouTube. If not, look it up. It's just where they go round and round in a circle. Kind of like the slightly more, well, never mind, I won't say it. But that's a track bike. Then you've got time trial bikes, which are meant to do one thing: go really, really fast. They are fairly lightweight. Most of them probably weigh less than 10 pounds. Or no, not 10 pounds, about 15, I think. And they're meant to do one thing: to get that guy from point A to point B as fast as he can. And then you've got road racing bikes. Now, they aren't necessarily any heavier, but their weight is used in different ways. They make the parts that need to be strong the heavier ones, and use lighter weight parts in areas where the stress is minimal. Now, there are other bikes. They have bikes for what they call touring, which is traveling from point A, let's say here in Grand Salt Lake Valley, to Logan. Might take you a day or two to ride, depending on how you ride. That's called a touring bike. The other ones are kind of The other one is kind of like a subset of that, or maybe it should be the first one, and touring bike's a subset, called a commuter, which is instead of driving your car to and fro from work, as my son does, he takes the bike every day, 7 miles down to his job, 7 miles back. That's what they call a commuter. Now, commuter bikes are usually the ones that you've probably seen around with fenders, a cargo rack on the back, possibly mud flaps. I don't know, but they'll have lights, and it looks like a bike that someone is his main form of transportation. Now, those are the diamond frame upright bikes that you and I and everybody else knows of. We've ridden them, we see them, it's okay. Another type of bike that we are going to get into, there are three types we will talk about today. The last one, I may decide to give a very brief description, and in the next video I will give a much more detailed description of it. The second type of bike is what's known as a recumbent. Now, this is a bike that you usually sit in, or you sit down on it, and instead of having, with your legs on either side of the frame, usually there's a wheel in front of you and a wheel in back of you, and the bike is significantly longer. Not always the case, though. There are some extremely short wheelbase bikes where your legs going out to the crank stick out a couple of feet. Because, hey, if you're like me, you got long legs and they're going to stick out that far. Now, most recumbents are two-wheel. There are those that are three or four. It's a definition thing, I think. Excuse me a second. Generally, a recumbent will have you in a more reclined, position versus a more sitting up in a chair like I am now look to it. see. There, these two types of bike recumbents, at least in the two-wheel varieties, get broken down into several categories. You have either above seat steering, which is when you the handlebar that you use to steer, change gears, brake is up here or anywhere above the seat. To under seat steering, which everything is. Imagine holding a broom under the seat you're sitting in now. That's what's called under seat steering. And some people, they love it. They like it. I've tried under seat steering recumbents, and I'm not that pleased with them. Maybe it was just the model I was riding. I don't know. But yeah, those are the two practical definitions of what a recumbent is. There's another type of recumbent called a trike. Now, this is not like the trike you may have seen growing up, where basically they're normal sized bike tires. There's just three of them, and it's a older person or someone who may have difficulty riding a normal bike. That's an adult tricycle, at least depending on the definition and where you get it from is what they call an adult trike. Recumbent trikes, on the other hand, come in two categories. The first one is what they call a delta. Now, I don't know much about Greek symbols and all that stuff, but a delta style trikes, at least in this one, have two wheels in the back and then a wheel in the front. Now, you may be reclined or you may be sitting upright. It really depends on the exact model. But these ones here, those particular ones are very fast, but in the turns they can be a little unstable, because imagine having something balanced on three wheels, and if you've been riding for any length of time or driving a car, you know that when you turn into a corner, whatever you're in is going to lean like this. Well, on a Delta, that could actually flip you over if you're going too quick. But that's, a Delta trike. The other type of recumbent trike that is out there is what they call a tadpole. A tadpole has two wheels in front and one in the back. This one is very stable. I've yet to see someone, unless he was deliberately aiming to, inadvertently flip it over. Most of the time you won't, because the way distribution is on a recumbent trike tadpole type, the rider is sitting anywhere right on the axle that is the two wheels to just behind it, making it anywhere from very responsive handling and very twitchy to something that is very stable to run. There are numerous bikes you can manufacture for these bikes online. I'm not going to give you any specific details about them. You can Google recumbent trike tadpole, recumbent trike delthon, whatever, and you'll get plenty of articles for it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The third type of bike I was going to talk about today, and we might call it a day here in just a bit, is what's known as velomobile. Now, if you plug that term into most search engines, you're going to get either, in one case, it got me the definition of what velomobile is to what I've seen it. A velomobile, as I've seen it, is a bike which is usually a recumbent, although not always. They're mostly custom bikes, but don't worry about them. Is a bike that usually is a recumbent tricycle. Will have anywhere from a soft fabric outer shell to a rigid metal one around it. And the driver or operator sits inside the bike and either has steering up here, like above seat steering, or it's down here on the sides, under seat steering. Velomobiles are, for me, kind of the evolutionary peak of bikes. I mean, they don't really get a whole lot better than that. Because, you've got something that can keep you out of the rain for the most part, and depending on the exact style of recumbent, velomobile you have, you can either be completely enclosed to where you're not going to get wet, except for when you're sweating like a pig, to your upper half from about here up is going to get drenched, but the rest of you is going to be, damp from sweat only, not rain. Okay. Those bikes will range anywhere. I've seen the cheapest velomobile starts at around $3,300, I believe, to as much as, I believe the cost for this particular model, and I'll put a link in the comments and description section for it. I believe it starts at $14,000. And when you see this thing and see how streamlined it is, yeah, it's a great bike. Odds are I'm not going to be able to afford it because, frankly, there's a particular type of bike I want. It's not going to be the one, that one. When we get to discussing these in more details, the various types, how they're put together, I will put up the link for the bike I particularly want. But, that's for another time. What else can I tell you about it? Oh, yeah. Most of uh, what people do for cycling these days, they get up, they cycle and whatever. But for someone who's like me, who's a big guy, and let's face it, 280 pounds is huge, and 6'4" is tall as hell. In some cases, you may feel a little self-conscious about going in there. For those of you who are big or tall and I don't really want to know, get off your butt like I did and go out and do it. Go to a used bike shop if there's one in your town. Look for a bike collective like we have here in Salt Lake. Go down there, get a bike, get yourself out there. Don't let your size fool you. Now, in cycling, I don't know exactly where these terms come from. I think they come from the triathlon world, where they swim, they ride, and they run. But a Clydesdale, such as me, is a man who weighs over 200 pounds or is over 6 feet in height. The female version of this is the Athena, which is a woman who is either 150 pounds or 5'10" or taller. I don't particularly care for either one of those because it pigeonholes me, but it does illustrate a point that cycling as a whole is geared for the lightweight crowd. How do you go about getting parts and equipment that will survive your weight or your height? I know the particular bike I'm running right now is a Unifica. My only complaint with it is even flat-footed, the top tube is about three. If I put three fingers like that, I can't get in between my top tube and my crotch. I can barely get maybe 1.5 fingers right there. Everything I know about fitting a bicycle says realistically guys should have at least 2 fingers of space there or 3 depending on their comfort level, just in case you brake really hard, stop and land, you don't sack yourself. For women, it's the same thing. I don't really like those bikes that are marketed for women that have a sloping down tube so that they can step through easier. No, because if you were to hit theoretically you could get involved in an accident and that frame will just collapse because the stress coming up the steering tube and going back like this has no tube right here. It has to go down, so it's just going to fold up. I don't particularly care for bikes that are marketed that way. That's just useful.
Like I said, this is just the start of a long series, hopefully a long series of videos that'll get you out there and get you right.
This is just episode number 1. What is a bike? This is Good Music Fan, the Rabid Cyclist, saying, keep yourself safe on the road, look over your left shoulder, and God us bless. Thank you.